they're going to launch a full-on pro-Israel brigade to combat the last 2 years of negative press. They know that they need to go ahead and push the propaganda, because if they're going to go ahead and attack Iran the way that they want, they're going to need U.S. support.
Do you think like an all-out war there is just inevitable then between the two countries? But then also including us.
I do think it's inevitable. What Israel wants is they want hegemony in the Middle East where no one can stand up to them. And basically they've cucked every single country. So Egypt and Jordan are bribed. We pay them a bunch of money to play nice with the Israelis. Hezbollah has been disrupted and dismantled to a significant degree. It's going to take them years to build up. Syria was destabilized because they backed the Ahmed al-Shara, who went ahead and took over Syria in 3 weeks. All the hostile countries have been either destroyed, destabilized, or are bribed by us. Iran's the last one standing.
Going to the peace deal, what do you know about, like, what is their perceived plan, right? Because I've not read so much into the details, but there was a few things that I saw and I was like, they were talking about giving people like some sort of crypto allocation to show that they have like,
oh,
is that real?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is like there was a plan of what they're going to do with the Gaza Strip after.
Yeah, and like how they would allocate land.
Yeah, so I could go through that real quick. So back in March, Netanyahu came to the White House, and this was in the middle of the tariff war, if you remember, right?
Yeah.
Now, presumably, on paper, he came to talk about tariffs, but the real reason he came was to talk about Gaza, the war, and bombing Iran. That's what he really came here for. And what ended up happening was Trump slipped, and he said, yeah, remember he said, we're going to take Gaza, we're going to cherish it and all this other shit. We're going to take it over. It's going to be a beautiful international location.
Yeah, I remember.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And the whole community was like, what? What are you, under what authority you're going to take Gaza? What are you talking about? And you can see Netanyahu kind of like, oh, because Trump is unpredictable, right? So after that, when the press started really grilling him and stuff, he backrolled that and he stopped talking about it all the way. I didn't see him mention it on the media at all. But then these, fast forward a couple months, and it got leaked about what their plans were to turn the place into basically like an international, location for tourism where people will go. And I kind of saw this coming because Gaza is like in a beautiful area. It's right on the beach, right on the ocean. And the Middle East has been trying to modernize for decades now. I think they've realized that, in the age of potentially having electric cars, right, less dependence on oil, etc., and also diversifying their economy portfolio, Dubai was kind of the leader in this, the UAE. And what they were able to do was they created, the UAE created Dubai, and it's a very successful city where you're able to bring a lot of people in from different places and create like almost like a tourism economy. Saudi Arabia said, wow, these guys are making money. We want to do the same. That's why they started modernizing. They allowed women to drive. They are bringing in more entertainment like WWE, boxing matches, etc. Saudi Arabia wants to jump in on this tourism angle. So I think people saw this and said, yo, we could do something like this with Gaza. Gaza's right on the thing. It's a beautiful location. Let's do it. So I think that they're trying, because that's prime real estate, they're basically going to go ahead and turn that place into a thing. And there was a 60-minute interview that came out a couple of days ago with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and they kind of let the cat out the bag again, saying like, oh yeah, we have a project plan, blah, blah, blah. And you can see Kushner like kind of getting uncomfortable as Witkoff was talking about some of this. But that was the plan the whole time. Level Gaza, make it inhabitable, encourage the people to leave the area, give them financial incentives. Oh, you could stay and keep your land if you hang out here, blah, blah, blah. But they want to get those people out of there so that they can go ahead and turn it into a huge tourist support, because it's a W, because now they can generate money. Now they don't have to worry about the Palestinians. They don't have to deal with the Palestinian question anymore, and they control the Gaza Strip, and they don't have to worry about anything. So that was the plan the whole time, was ethnically cleanse these guys and turn it into a tourist hub, which would make a lot of money.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So did Qatar pay you to say that, or what?
Yeah, $7,000.
Qatar. Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy how on Twitter, like you said, there's a lot more pro-Israel stuff, but it's funny to see at least now, I guess maybe it's probably because of the Mandani thing, but like there's a ton of like, it's Muslims and it's Islamists that we have to be afraid of now.
Yeah, did you see that? I literally tweeted about
I see
this.
that all the time on Twitter now.
Dude, once they push this like new narrative, this new algo, I've seen nothing but like jihadis, Islamists, that's the biggest threat to America, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, bro, look, I have had my criticisms, even though I'm a Muslim, I'm very objective on certain things, and I call it out whether I benefit from it or not. But to say that Muslims are a threat to national security of the United States, or that they're the biggest threat to America, not even close, bro. We're talking about 1 to 2% of the population with almost no representation in the government or positions of real power in America. They're not a threat at all. I would argue power is a way bigger threat to the United States, because guess what, bro? We're not making anti-Arab laws where we're sending people to jail and deporting them for talking shit about Qatar or Saudi Arabia, but we're absolutely doing that for the Israelis.
Yeah, I mean, that was some shit I couldn't believe. I mean, I remember even time ago was Texas was like, if you boycott Israel products,
Oh
and we'll,
yeah,
like, I'm just like, bro, what's
can't get aid.
happening?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not gonna get hurricane aid. Like, what
yeah,
are we talking about?
dude. It just goes to show like how cucked our government is to
But
Israel, bro. It's
the thing
bad.
that blows my mind in this whole conversation is that, do they think, I'm sort of convinced that they just think people are just so motherfucking stupid that they won't see it. Do you think that's their angle? They're too dumb.
No, I think what it is they've gotten complacent, and I'll explain what I mean by this. So for decades, right, Israel's been able to enjoy, because of obviously overrepresentation in media in the United States run by American, Israel's been able to enjoy a lack of scrutiny and criticism because anyone that did criticize or attack them would immediately be canceled. You go ahead and talk shit about Israel, power, any of this stuff, you're getting cooked. They're going to label you anti-Semite, a radical, get this guy the fuck up out of here, boom. But what Israel did not anticipate was their retaliation to October 7th getting documented the way that it did and getting put out on social media platforms where they don't have the stranglehold that they had on regular media from before. And I think what happened is they've enjoyed this lack of scrutiny for so long that they got comfortable and said, oh yeah, let's just do what we always do. Let's just bomb the Palestinians, cut the grass, no big deal. It is what it is. We're going to ethically cleanse them and nobody's going to care. They didn't anticipate that social media would flame them and come back to bite them later on. And they're realizing it now. This is why Netanyahu went and did an interview with the Nelk. This is why he did an interview with Tatum. This is why he did an interview with Trigonometry.
Pat Bet David as well.
PBD as well. So what he's doing is now they're realizing like, oh, we've lost the narrative. The mainstream media that we controlled before doesn't have the juice that it used to. We can't go ahead and, pay CNN and Fox to not show, pictures of these kids getting blown up. Oh, so now Netanyahu is trying to do interviews on friendly stations and, answer questions, as well as they're putting money into the purchase of TikTok, right? To fix the situation over there. They're putting money into Twitter to get them to censor people more. I predict YouTube is going to be next, where if you're too critical, they're going to start putting you down for hate speech. I predict also these other social media companies are going to start getting moderated. And then on top of that, and you alluded to this earlier, with the influencers going to like look at all the aid, now they're paying influencers to come out and be pro-Israel. So they're going to launch a full-on pro-Israel brigade to combat the last 2 years of negative press, because they've been so focused on attacking Iran and Lebanon and the Houthis that they haven't had time to really fix their press reputation. But now that the war is pretty much done now at this point with at least Gaza, they know that they need to go ahead and push the propaganda and get U.S. support again. Because if they're going to go ahead and attack Iran the way that they want, they're going to need U.S. support.
Do you think it's going to happen? Like they're for sure going to do it?
You know,
even without the support?
That's
Excuse
a good
me.
question.
The support of the American people. It sounds like they'll probably have the support of America.
Yeah. So what I think is this. So Operation Rising Lions, which was the attack that they did back in June, the 12-day war, Israel basically busted its entire load. Pause. And I'll explain what I mean by this. It was a fantastically done operation. And this is another reason, too, why I criticize the Israelis so much, because I know the capacity of the Shin Bet. I know the capacity of the Mossad, Unit 8200, which is their NSA, which collects signals intelligence. They're right up there with us, if not better than our intelligence agencies. I mean, the pager attack in Lebanon that they did you know that they had those bombs and those cell phones and those beepers and walkie-talkies for 10 years?
No, I didn't know that it was that long. I heard about that, but I didn't know it was that long.
Bro, 10 years they had those explosives in those devices. 10 years. And they, triggered them all.
How do you know that? Like, how do you know that?
I watched a documentary on it, and the New York Times reported it too.
Okay.
So they had them there for literally like almost a decade. And then while they were doing that, they were doing airstrikes, precise airstrikes, and they went out and did a ground assault. And they were able to do that. With Operation Rising Lions, they had Mossad agents in Iran building drones, shipping themselves parts and building it slowly but surely. And what ended up happening was, with the Mossad,
sounds like you were there, bro. You sure you weren't there? It sounds like you know too much.
Hey, man, I got paid. The Israelis gave me money. I got to pretend to be the opposition, control the opposition, right? So what ended up happening with the 12-day war and how it kicked off was, you had Israeli Mossad operatives behind enemy lines in Iran being there for roughly, who knows, a couple months, maybe a couple years, because they had to assemble all these drones in country. So they had to ship themselves the parts or smuggle them in and build these drones in country. So what ended up happening was they launched these drones, took out the air defense, right? And this allowed the fighter jets to come in and do targeted strikes and kill several generals and nuclear scientists. And then on top of that, they started attacking other strategic positions and they jammed their radar. So Iran was basically blind for 24 hours. They couldn't even respond because they had tried to decapitate them. And what the Israelis failed with is they thought, okay, if we hit them hard like this, we're going to go ahead and get all the people that don't like the Ayatollah to rebel and take over the country. But it didn't work the way that they wanted. and it failed and actually backfired. What ended up happening was it actually united the country. And the reason why it united the country was because in the Iranian government system, they got the reformists, which is like their version of the Democrats, and then the conservatives, right? And on the reformist side, the left-wing side, they're like, yo, we need to have diplomacy with the West. You know, we want to get these sanctions gone. They're crippling us. We need to fix our economy and get into the global picture financially. But on the conservative side, they're like, no, the West can't be trusted. These guys, you know, backed out the nuclear deal. They put us on the terrorist watch list. They're giving us crippling sanctions. The West can't be trusted. So when Israel attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations, by the way, they were supposed to have they attacked them, I think, on a Friday or a Thursday, and they're supposed to meet in Qatar on like Sunday. That's when they said, you know what? Gloves are off. Both the reformists and the conservatives got together and said, let's hit these guys back. And what ended up happening was Iran just launched a ton of missiles at Israel. And the thing that I realized is like the mainstream media didn't recover appropriately. Dude, Iran Israel up. And now they're starting to admit, yeah, they hit a bunch of our intel spots. They hit Mossad bases, Shin Bet bases. They hit some of their missile defense. They hit a bunch of different strategic areas in Israel. And the reason why I know this is because there were journalists there trying to document the damage. Bro, the cops would arrest them or kick them out if they were caught recording any of these places getting hit, because the Israelis didn't want the Iranians to know what was hit and what wasn't, so they can refine the GPS coordinates and keep sending in missiles to be more accurate. So the Israelis did a really good job of making sure that it wasn't too public how hard they were getting hit. But the reality is this: as time continued to pass on, the interceptor missiles that the Israelis were using to shoot down these Iranian rockets, they're running out. Because to shoot down a missile costs significantly more than for the missile to come in. So in other words, in a battle of attrition, Iran is going to win because those interceptor missiles, number one, they have less of them and they're way harder to make and more expensive. Israel's spending like millions upon millions of dollars a day just to defend themselves. And at some point, they're going to run out of the missiles. This is why the United States bombed those nuclear facilities to end the war. Because if it had kept going, Israel's Iron Defense, David Sling, I can't remember the third one right now, but these air defense systems wouldn't have been able to sustain much longer because they didn't have enough interceptor missiles. So they had to end the war. Otherwise, Israel would have gotten absolutely cooked. And Israel, I've always said, when it comes to the IDF, they're like a glass cannon. They got good weaponry. They're very good on the attack. They're not so good on the defense. And the Iranians proved that with their ballistic missile program, which, you know, really hit Israel hard. And there was a couple missiles that they couldn't hit. The Iranians have a bunch of hypersonic missiles, which can't be stopped. So,
but don't you think if Israel wanted the narrative to be that they are sort of victims in the situation, which I think a lot of the times you would argue is like that's their sort of prerogative, and I think a lot of people think like that's kind of what they quote unquote do, right? Wouldn't they want the mainstream media to report that sort of damage?
No. And the reason why is because they didn't want the Iranians to know that they had hit a lot of their strategic locations. It's coming out now, right? I had to watch Israeli media to find out. I had to watch Arab media to find out. Like in Western media, they exclusively didn't report it. But yeah, they got hit pretty hard, man. And now it's starting to come out.
But that's what that was my question was like, don't you think you would garner more support from the West if they were having a harder time than an easier time?
Nah, because they started the war.
Oh, yeah, I see what
like
you're
they
saying.
attacked them first. And not only did they attack them, bro, that was like a Pearl Harbor event for Iran. Like it was literally like Israel was trying, their goal, what they were hoping is that they would destroy their air defense, bomb the hell out of them, and then the people would rise up and take over from the Ayatollah. Because there's a lot of civil unrest in Iran because their economy sucks. Their dollar's been like, you know, fluctuating. They're getting crippling sanctions. And the old guy, the former Shah, or I think his son or whatever, was sending all these PSAs, you know, speaking in Farsi to the people saying, rise up, take your country back. But the people didn't fall for the propaganda. If anything, it forced them to rally around the flag, and it made them become even more in line with the Ayatollah because they looked at it like, look, we have our grievances with our government here, but we're not going to let these Israelis attack us like this. After they got attacked, bro, people took to the streets. Thousands of Iranians took to the streets and said, attack them back, hit them back. And then that united the reformists and the conservatives, and they agreed, we're going to hit them back. And they hit them back really hard, bro.
Do you think like an all-out war there is just inevitable then between the two countries? Well, then it's also including us.
Yeah, so I do think it's inevitable because Iran is the last country left standing at this point. Operation Rising Lion, they kind of busted their loads.
Last standing that is kind of stopping them from feeling completely protected, right?
Yeah, so what Israel wants is they want hegemony in the Middle East where no one can stand up to them. And basically, they've cucked every single country. So Egypt and Jordan are bribed. We pay them a bunch of money to play nice with the Israelis. Hezbollah has been disrupted and dismantled to a significant degree. It's going to take them years to build up. Syria was destabilized because they backed the Ahmed al-Shara, who went ahead and took over Syria in 3 weeks and got Bashar al-Assad out of there. So now Syria's, you know, basically destabilized. The Houthis have been weakened. They killed a lot of their government higher ups. Saudi Arabia obviously, deals with Israel politically, even though they try not to admit it. UAE, Qatar, all these other places, they deal with Israel. So all the hostile countries have been either destroyed, destabilized, or are bribed by us. Iran's the last one standing.
Yeah.
Iraq was destroyed too.
Yeah, obviously.
That was for Israel. Dude, that's the biggest lie. Like they said, oh yeah, Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden, like we're working together. That's the biggest lie. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden hate each other. That's one of the biggest lies that still to this day, for some odd reason, people still talk about. The whole war in Iraq was a huge, huge lie.
Yeah. Well, that one really gets me. That's the one, like, even if I don't know all the details of it, you can just hear the Netanyahu guy speak about both those situations and then speak about the situation currently. And the thing that just rung in my mind, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but there is footage of him, I don't know, 30 years ago saying, we need to strike them. We need to strike them. We need a regime change, all this stuff, right?
This is what he said exactly.
Yes.
He says, if we take out Saddam, it's going to have positive reverberations across the region. Yeah. And he said that. And also, the thing that got us into war with Iraq, and I'll sum it real quick for you. Mohammed Atta, the head hijacker during 9/11, they claimed that Mohammed Atta met with Iraqi intelligence officers in either Prague or Malaysia, and they gave him anthrax. That was the link that they used. And guess who gave us that intel? Israeli intelligence. And we used that, the neocons and the Bush administration, which, by the way, these neocons, a majority of them are, by the way, whether it's Daniel Pearl, Douglas Feith, Wolfowitz, Robert Kagan, Bill Kristol, all these guys are the only one that really wasn't from that era with the PNAC was John Bolton, who just got indicted, actually, and Judith Miller, another neocon, big reporter. All these people pushed the anthrax lie and the whole we must attack Iraq.
But even despite this, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's footage of Netanyahu talking about regime change and how we need to do that in the area.
100%. Yeah. You're right. Back in like 2002, he came to the United States and he said it under oath.
Right. So there's
a press conference or something.
There's that literal action that he said. Like there's that footage of him speaking. And then he gets on the Nelk Boys podcast and they ask him about regime change specifically in Iran. Yeah. And he says that never works.
Yeah, that's a lie. That's what they want is regime change.
And I'm just like, yo, but that's the thing you campaigned for 30 years about. 30 years ago, rather. We need a regime change in this area, in the Middle East. And then now it's just so funny to see him say it later, oh, it doesn't work. It's like, you're the guy who campaigns for that.
Netanyahu is a very good politician. He understands who his audience is. He knows coming to the United States and saying we need a regime change would be wildly unpopular because we all still have a bad taste in our mouth from Iraq, right? Which another funny story, by the way, after the Iraqi war, guess who Israel gets most of their oil from? Iraq. It's not us, it's the Kurds. Because once they destabilized Saddam, who had beef with the Kurds, what ended up happening was now they get a majority of their oil from Iraq. And they got rid of Saddam, who was one of the biggest enemies and the biggest threats to them. So what's left is Iran. But yeah, that whole Iraq war, trying to connect Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker, to Iraqi intelligence officials, this is the lie that all the neocons ran with for years to justify that war and weapons of mass destruction, which ended up all being a lie.
Yeah.
The anthrax was made here in the United States.
And then we left a bunch of the there, and then it's like everyone agreed that it was a waste of time, but it's like, but yet here we are still dealing with it.
Took us 20 years to figure it out. And Netanyahu knows that the Iraq war left a lot of resentment with Americans, so he's very intelligent where he doesn't say regime change anymore because he knows that means there needs to be boots on the ground in a war. One thing about Netanyahu is he says certain things with Western media, then he says certain things with Israeli media. So like that peace plan that we were discussing earlier, that 20-point plan. So once they went ahead and negotiated the plan, immediately after, he goes on Israeli television, right, in Hebrew, and says, oh, guys, don't worry, we're just kind of feigning diplomacy. The war's going to continue on. Because the people that support Netanyahu are far-right weirdos like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who are genocidal maniacs. Like, these guys just want to get rid of all the Arabs. They want them all gone. These guys are super far-right. As a matter of fact, Netanyahu is considered moderate compared to these guys, right?
Yeah.
So to appease his constituents, he's in a rock and a hard place because on one end, Trump is putting pressure on him to, have a ceasefire so that, Trump can keep good relations with his people in Qatar and, the Middle East. And he just struck that deal with all this investment. But Netanyahu is like, I got to keep the war going because these guys that support me want the war. And if I don't make them happy, I'm not going to be prime minister anymore. And then I'm going to go to jail because he's in the middle of a corruption trial right now. So that's kind of what he's navigating, where he says one thing in American media and then he says something else in Israeli media to appease his constituents in Israel.
Yeah. What is the corruption trial? Like, do you know what specifically he's?
Yeah, basically bribery. He was getting like cigars and expensive wine and, you know, bribery, embezzlement, and corruption, stuff like that. And this has been going on since 2016.
Oh, okay. So it didn't really have anything to do with like geopolitics. It's just him getting money and stuff on the side.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, yeah, him, you know, taking bribes and shit like that.
So
You
it's
know,
not because other Israelis in Israel are like, yo, what he's doing is wrong?
No.
Yeah, okay. But
No.
isn't there a large populations of Israelis that do believe what he's doing is wrong?
Yeah, there's a human rights organization, B'Tselem, I think is the name, and they're a Israeli human rights group, and they have even said, yeah, this is a genocide.
Yeah.
You know, even Holocaust scholars, you know, Israeli genocide experts and people that are even, you know, Holocaust historians, etc., they're all coming forward, and every single genocide expert has basically come forward and said, yeah, what's going on in Gaza right now is absolutely genocide.
Yeah.
You know, and the Israelis try to deny it, but the reality is the definition of genocide is extermination of a group of people in whole or in part. And you can make the argument for sure that they've been killing them in part, because when this is all said and done, dude, I predict we're going to have somewhere between 100,000 to 600,000 dead.
Yeah. And then the narrative is always, well, but if it was a genocide, we would have just killed them all like that.
Exactly. And
it's just such a funny thing. That's like, damn, that's your defense to the argument, is that if it was a genocide, we would have just killed them all like that. It's like, wait a minute, dude. What's going on here?
They're ridiculous, bro. Or they'll say, oh, Hamas is using them as human shields. Bro, like, the problem is that, like, they don't take any accountability and they blame everything on Hamas. Oh, yeah, it's Hamas's fault that we are killing you guys like this. It's Hamas's fault. It's like, bro, and this is what I always say, because I've debated so many Zionists.
But the problem with that is, like, you can't say you have the best military, the best intelligence, the best equipment, but Hamas. That's the problem with it.
Precisely.
Like, that's the layman. You could just go, I don't need to know anything, but like those things don't add. Like I said earlier, it doesn't jive together. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because the reality is Hamas is a ragtag militia with World War II weapons, okay? These guys don't have anything sophisticated. So let me get this straight. You're able to do a 10-year pager intelligence operation against Hezbollah, who actually is a strong military that's actually beat Israel on multiple occasions. They beat them in 2006, and they whooped their ass in the 80s too, dragged them out of there. And then you were able to do an operation against the IRGC and do all this stuff surreptitiously with no problems, two superior militaries, but you're telling me that you guys can't do precise strikes against Hamas? This doesn't make sense. It was never about getting rid of Hamas. It was about destroying Gaza so it's inhabitable so they can get the people out of there. That's what it was about. It was never about Hamas or the hostages. It was about making it inhabitable to get those people out of there.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I'm going to have that kid from Gaza back on the show one more time to talk about the ceasefire and everything. I'm really excited to do that.
Yeah, that 20-point plan. Also, the Israelis have already, like, they've killed hundreds of Palestinians already. They've already violated it. And their grounds is, and the Israelis do this all the time, they broker deals that they know can't really be fulfilled so that they can go ahead and renege on what they agreed to. And I'll give you an example. So there was multiple parts of the deal, but one of them was releasing all the hostages, right? So obviously Hamas made good on it, released all the hostages, right? And they got back, like, I think 1,000 Palestinians. But they said, okay, well, we need the 20 corpses of the Israelis that died. Well, Hamas is like, okay, we need time, though, because they're buried under the rubble. Now ask yourself, wait, if they're buried under the rubble, how did Hamas kill them? The IDF killed them. The Israelis killed them. And for every Zionist that I debate on this topic, they're like, no, Hamas killed them. Or, well, they say Hamas. That's how the Israelis pronounce it. Hamas. And I'm like, okay, how does this make sense? If Hamas has an inferior military, they don't have air superiority, they really can't fight the Israelis at all in any way. What leverage do they have? The only leverage they have is the hostages. Why the would they kill their only leverage? Doesn't make sense. The reality is, these Israelis that were killed by the IDF during airstrikes or starvation.
Yeah,
but they'll sit there and lie and say Hamas killed them. It doesn't make sense. You're telling me they risked all that and go through all the trials and tribulations to keep them hidden so that they can kill them? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.